friends, let's settle in. Let's just each get to a physical spot where we can get comfortable. If you want to close your eyes, I invite you to do that. If that's not available, just find a way to really bring yourself into this moment right here. Let all the busyness of the day go. Even the things that you were doing just 5 minutes before you sat down or you laid down. And just allow yourself to take a slow, deep breath in right here. And a slow, deep breath out. And a slow breath in. And a slow, gentle breath out. And just allow your physical body to come to a point of stillness. And then just watch and see if maybe the mind will start to follow. Let the body set the pace right here. As the movement becomes less, maybe the mind will begin to quiet just a bit as well. And just notice how easy that is or how difficult that is. Or how familiar that feels to become still in the body and still in the thoughts. Or how unfamiliar it feels. And I want us to notice that because today's Yoga Sutra comes from the 4th chapter. It's the 11th one that he writes about. And he says, there is this really close dependence between your impressions in your mind and the desires that you have. And he said that when one of those, the desires, begins to become a little less, the impressions in your mind become a little less also. And he's not talking about these desires like our deepest heart's longing for our purpose, our heart's desire to see peace and kindness in our world. He's talking about these desires that come out of these senses that tend to lead us a little bit astray. We feel something and then we just want more, or we taste something and we want more. Or we see something and we feel a draw toward it. And while we're not meant to ignore our senses, we've got to find this really, really good balance between feeling and experiencing and taking in the world and letting that stop before it causes us to go astray, before it pulls us down away from the present moment, before it leads us into a habit that we don't want or need to have, before it causes us to just spiral into more senses and more thoughts and more desires. Because what happens is, he says, these two are so intimately connected that the more that you desire and that you want something, it creates this impression in your mind. I always teach these as thumbprints. Like this thumbprint has come onto your brain, and the more that you just let it be, the more you kind of feed that desire, the deeper the grooves of that thumbprint. And over time, as you let those desires and those sensory stimuli just keep pulling you away and distracting you, the grooves, the impressions in your mind get deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's how, as humans, we end up in these kind of conditioned ways of being, these conditioned ways of thinking. And then one day we look up and think, how did I get this far down the road? When did I begin to think that way? And if we were able to go back in time, we could almost unpack step by step by step of that groove, that impression in our mind getting deeper and deeper and deeper. But what Patanjali says, this wise, but also very simplistic author of these great yogic texts, he said, because they're so intimately connected, when the latter begins to become less, the former does as well. Meaning when the desire can get under control, when we can feel the things, see the things, taste the things, but not let it go awry, the impressions, the conditioned ways of thinking in our mind start to get lessened as well. Scientists would say that that's the neuroplasticity of our brain, that we can teach ourselves new things and these habits are not stuck, that they're not forever. But long before science had a name for it, the yogic texts, the great spiritual teachings from thousands of years ago said, first you understand that impressions and desires, they go hand in hand. And sometimes we try to fight against the impressions and we try to fix those, but really, he says, you got to start with those desires. Start with those stimuli that come in, and all of a sudden you look up and it's hours later and you're still scrolling, or it's moments later and you're still engaging in that thing and you've lost track of time. Or it's 2 servings later and you feel like you can't move and you think, why didn't I just stop? Even though it tasted so good. Or it's the next day and you realize that you let that conversation, that gossip, that stuff just continue to go far too long. And I'm not naming habits that we need to make ourselves feel bad about, but those are just real life examples of this one little desire of, I kind of like how that tastes. Or I kind of like being drawn into that gossip for just a few minutes. And then you look up and you realize it went on far too long. And even though you realize that in the moment, what's happened in our minds is those thumbprints of how gossip makes us feel or how that bowl of ice cream tasted, the grooves got a little bit deeper. Which means the next time that the bowl of ice cream is given to us or the gossip happens in the office or in the organization where we are, it will be harder to resist it because the impression is deeper. And Patanjali was not telling us that we can't engage in a bowl of ice cream. It's just this example of something that starts off just as enjoyment. If we're not careful, the desire begins to take over. And all of a sudden, we're drawn away from the present moment. We're drawn away from the things that make us healthy and balanced and grounded. And perhaps worst of all, we're drawn away from the center of peace that we work so hard to cultivate. But he gives us hope in this text when he says, start to work on the desires. Recognize them about yourself. And then the next time it comes, be so committed that you're ready to begin to let its influence, let its impact on your life go. You'll set aside the extra serving. You'll walk away from the gossiping conversation. You'll set the phone down and let the scrolling stop. Whatever the thing is that tends to draw you away from who you know that you want to be, from the peace that you know you want to experience every single day. And as you step away from that desire, it's almost like you're putting up a hand and saying, not today. Again, back to the scientists, what they would say is that you're teaching yourself a new pattern. You're teaching your brain new ways to be. And what I would say, and the ancient teachers would tell us, is the groove of your impression is getting a little less deep. It's losing its influence over you, decision by decision. Because you're choosing your peace and your grounding more than you're choosing that thing. And then all of a sudden, because the desire is under control, the impression becomes less. And so I want us just to pause here and just each of us think of what's the one thing, and probably it's not a bowl of ice cream, but what's the one thing that you know in your own personal life you let it go a little too much or a lot too much. We're not here to make a list. We're not here to fix all the things. Just there's that one desire or that one really conditioned way of being that you have this really keen sense that if that was the one you began to get a little more control over, things really would begin to shift. So just think to yourself, what is that thing, that habit, that desire? And then what I'd like us to do is just sit with it, see it, recognize it, own it. I did this not too terribly long ago myself. I finally was able to admit and realize what was the thing that just kept drawing me away from what I know I needed to do and how I know I wanted to be. And for me, it was not a bowl of ice cream, and it was not gossip in the workplace. It was this almost addiction to being busy. I always excused it by being the person that gets the things done. And it makes me feel useful. It makes me feel like I have relevance and value in the world. The busier that I am, the more value that I must have. And then I started to realize that mindset, that impression was robbing me of the chance to be still. And I've known this about myself for a very long time, but it wasn't until I truly was able to sit with it, own it, realize that my value does not come from how much my calendar is filled. Then all of a sudden, the draw, almost the addiction of the busyness, began to lessen. And no longer when I would sit on the couch and just read or drink a cup of tea without anything to do, no longer did I feel guilty. Because for years I did. And I watched as it began to shift, and I knew that meant that those grooves on my brain, my mind, were getting less and less deep. It will always be the thing that I struggle with. But now that I understand it, I see it and I own it, it's lost so much power over me. And my impressions are beginning to change. And so I share that with you because sometimes this thing starts off as a really good thing. It doesn't have to always be a bad thing like gossip or overeating. It could be something that really starts off as good. And then over time, it loses its good because it's become too much. And so let's just each sit with that one thing, not a list. See the thing. Breathe and ground yourself as you see it. And just imagine what it would look like just one time, the next time that thing comes up, for you to act differently. Imagine yourself doing that. And so let's just sit with those two images. One, the image of the thing, the desire. And then the image of what it would look like the next time for you to choose something different. A different way of being. A different way of doing. Continuing to hold those two images in your mind. The image of your thing, the desire that needs to be checked just a bit, and the image of what it will look like the next time that that thing comes across your path. What will it look like? What will you do? See yourself doing that. I used to imagine myself stopping the busyness. And then I realized it wasn't enough to just imagine it. I had to actually do it. And now as I've come to the other side, again, it will always be the thing. It will always be the thing that I have to keep in check. Because it's so easy to go back the other way and let those impressions just begin to deepen again. But once you get a few steps away from this desire having such a strong pull in your life, you'll be so selective in where you let your energy go. You'll want to protect that peace. You'll want to honor the work that you've done to get to this point. And that is truly, truly what I want for each of us. As the desire lessens, so goes the impressions. So goes the grooves in our mind. And through that we make more room for peace and stillness and presence. Namaste.